Hi, everybody. So today we are here with Kevin Cleary. He is the MS/MIS faculty director, and we are going to be asking some questions that are great highlights of our MS/MIS program. So let's begin with the first one. So, Kevin, sometimes we get questions on how the MS/MIS program differs from the MSBA program. We would love to hear your perspective on the differences, especially since there is a business analyst career journey within MS/MIS.
Yeah, sure. Happy to talk through that a little. So it's kind of an interesting history because the business analytics program actually grew out of the MIS program. And, to a degree, I think it helps to kind of parse out the terms a little bit. The word analyst and analysis and analytics all sound really similar to each other, but they all mean pretty different things. And so, maybe it'll help to kind of tug the thread a little on those words. So, one of the first things we want to talk about when we talk about an analyst, in particular, a business analyst, that is typically someone or, a profession or part of the industry that you're working very heavily in needs assessment, in assessing system requirements, in understanding business needs, and then translating those or serving in some kind of a diplomat role to then ultimately transform those business needs into actual IT functionality and vice versa. So a business analyst is somebody that kind of fits into both roles. They're kind of a technical person, they're kind of a business person, and they understand the business drivers and the vision of the organization and what the end goals of an enterprise architecture are, so that they can then start translating those back into actual technical foundational needs. And we see these types of roles a lot, especially when we talk about product management, which is a very popular kind of journey or path within the MIS program. We see these when we're talking about enterprise management. We see these when we're talking about strategic enterprise IT leadership. This analyst role is important because it's what ultimately bridges the gap between the business world and then how the information technology or the information services role kind of helps implement that at the end of the day. One of the things I used to say when I used to kind of manage operational IT organizations is, look, the information technology area builds the buckets and constructs the buckets, and then it's up to the business areas to kind of fill those buckets with innovation. And that's what the analyst role helps to do. Switching gears a little, when we talk about analysis or analytics, those tend to be data driven. And they're somewhat related in that we're combing through copious amounts of data using all kinds of different statistical tricks and magic to get that data to kind of reveal and give up its secrets. In the case of analysis, we're trying to tell a story that already happened based from our data. In the case of analytics, well, now we're taking a step further and we're trying to project into the future. We're trying to tell a story that hasn't been told yet. And the better job we can project into the future, the more innovation and competitive advantage we can bring to our organization. But it's with these two kind of data-driven roles, that's where the analytics piece, the business analytics piece tends to kind of pick up. It's more data-driven. It's more data-focused. And I think one of the confusing pieces is the way job descriptions are written and the way that employers are actually, marketing these different opportunities to students, because oftentimes employers will mix all three of these words together. They will mix all three of these terms together. And so it does make kind of a confusing scenario for students. But, the key takeaways here, I think, are that, when we're talking about analysis or analytics, something that's data driven, something where the data is telling a story, that tends to be the business analytics program. Whereas more of that diplomatic function or that translational role with understanding the technical portion of the organization, understanding the enterprise infrastructure, and understanding the business needs, kind of the three legs of the milking stool there, tend to go into the analyst role, which is one of the career journeys, so to speak, that we talk about in the MIS program. What we also typically tell students is, look, just pay attention to, when you're trying to navigate this and you start searching for jobs, just pay attention to what's in the job description. We've seen examples of some students who said, oh, I got a product manager or I got a business analyst role, and really it's a data analytics role. And so, like we said, employers kind of tend to intermix these terms as well. And so when students are searching, it's just important to kind of pay attention to what are the actual job functions at the end of the day.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think you did a great job of explaining that and really making a point that looking at the functions of both of these types of roles definitely will help students understand the differences. So thank you so much. The second question we have is we often get questions on if applicants need experience in certain programs and softwares. What are your thoughts, and what are the best ways a student can prepare if they don't have experience using MIS software systems? And then can you also elaborate on what kinds of programs and softwares the students can expect to learn?
Yeah. So I'll kind of address this in two parts here. This is a very common question I get from students that are either, they haven't accepted yet or they have accepted and they're, they kind of want to get ahead a little. They want to be able to hit the ground running once the program starts, once our core classes and electives start. And it's a real common concern among students that perhaps are less technical in nature in terms of, oh my God, I don't know programming. That's okay. We'll teach you the programming you need, or we'll at least provide you the framework and the structure so that you can learn the programming you need. That said, never hurts to get ahead. And let me backtrack a little by saying, for the students that aren't as technically inclined, when I kind of picture, the space that the MIS program occupies, we can have students that are incredibly technical in nature, that have all kinds of programming experience and project management experience, but they want to be able to then kind of fulfill more of that managerial, more of that leadership, more of that innovation role. And so that's one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum is, we have students that are those talented managers, that are those talented leaders, that are absolute experts in a particular industry or particular space, but they want to be more technical. And so really what we're trying to have both sets of students kind of meet in the middle. The more highly technical students will learn some of these strategic leadership objectives and some of the managerial skills and the project management, all the different pieces that we implement in our journeys. Whereas the students that are experts in that area, we do want to make them more technical. And so we're kind of doing both, and we're having both groups meet in the middle. So for those non-technical students that maybe they want to, start exploring some of these items ahead of time, usually what we'll suggest is if you want to, take some kind of free class or even have a conversation with ChatGPT or whatever you want to do, start to gain some experience with structured query language, SQL. The language that we use to really kind of interrogate databases, feed information into and out of relational databases, and it kind of forms the basis for some of our reporting. The other typical thing that we recommend is maybe start to learn a little bit of Python. Python could potentially underlie many of the classes or none of the classes, depending on how you choose to pursue projects and the angle you choose and things like that. I read a really interesting book once. It was kind of a sci-fi book. It's called Rapture for the Geeks. And one of the quotes in there was, well, it's good to learn, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's good to learn a programming language because when computers take over the world, at least we can speak their language. And so, even if it's not a huge need or a huge draw on the program, because some classes are very strategic in nature and they won't require any shred of programming whatsoever, it's still good to have that underlying program knowledge anyway. And this will change and morph over time. But right now, Python is really one of the languages out there with the most amount of utility to it, which is why you see so many free resources for it out there. And so those are really the two kind of areas where we say, look, it's not required, but definitely if you want to hit the ground running, this helps with this SQL structured query language and with Python. Now, in terms of some of the tooling that we will employ and implement within the program, there's a lot. And a student's experience is going to vary based on the types of classes they take. It's going to vary based on the instructors for those classes. We could have two sections of a class and, one instructor might choose R to implement predictive analytics, another might choose Python, another might choose SAS or SPSS. So, still the same underlying foundational knowledge at the end of the day, just different tooling to implement that. But when we look at some of the types of tooling that we employ throughout the program, I'll just rattle off a few names here. It's by no means comprehensive. And it is by no means mutually exclusive per class section or instructor. But, we're using different kinds of reporting or data visualization tools like Tableau or Power BI. We're using different kinds of relational database tools such as Microsoft SQL Server or Oracle DBMS or Oracle's Live DBMS version. We're using virtualization tools like VMware. We're using cloud platforms like Amazon AWS or Microsoft Azure. either their platform as a service or infrastructure as a service offerings. We're using things like Salesforce. In the InfoSec space, we're using tools like Splunk or Wireshark. Some of the statistical analytics space, we're using tools like R or UCINet or Orange or SAS Data Miner. A few other tools that are out there. We have one of the things we're going to talk about in a little bit is generative AI and large language models. We have one professor out there that's using the different OpenAI open source platforms to develop different local large language models that can literally run on a desktop, laptop, smart device even. And so he does demos with that. We're using tools like Spirion for identity and privacy types of lessons. We're using tools like Marvel for UI and UX design. We're using Trello and Microsoft Project for our different project management tools. And that's just to name a few. I don't want to overwhelm students, but we are heavy on the tooling piece. The tooling is used and implemented in such a way that it reinforces some of the classroom, a lot of the classroom instruction that we're ultimately providing for students.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think it's really great that our program can fit so much into just a short 11 months, and that these students are able to have access to all of these different software systems and are able to learn about all of them. So I think that's a really great part of our program.
Yeah, and Megan, to that point, it's an aggressive program, right? It's a 1 year program, and students are walking away from a lot with that 1 year program. And we have made structural changes to try to make that more digestible to students so that they can reasonably kind of absorb all this knowledge. But I think that's one of the many selling points of this program is you're through it in a year, and you're going to get a huge depth of information, through your journey as you progress through the different semesters with these different classes.
Absolutely. Yeah, just having the access to all of these programs and being able to come in with maybe no knowledge or very limited to students that have a lot of experience working with these programs. I think it's a great learning environment, and definitely an amazing thing to be able to put on a resume and speak to in a job interview after our graduates start entering the workforce. So definitely fantastic part of our program. The next question we have is, can you talk about how the program teaches students about generative AI and how that can give them an edge in the job market?
Yeah, so I mean, look, generative AI is certainly all the rage right now, and it's redefining so many things faster than we can keep up, industry by industry, position by position, job by job. New roles, new careers are being spun up that are based on generative AI. So, definitely something that we all have to wrap our heads around in different, unique, and innovative and responsible ways. I think the biggest thing, the biggest caution I would have for students as they're going, they're watching this webinar, they're going out, they're comparing other programs, other institutions. It's really easy to just say, oh, we do generative AI, and that's it. Or, spin up a topical elective that is essentially a class on how to use ChatGPT. Folks already know how to do that. Our students are already knowing how to do that. And so, the tack we're taking here is, yes, well, we're spinning up new electives that, kind of focus on reasonable, appropriate use and integration of different generative AI platforms into our already existing processes and what that could look like. One of the things we are trying to be realistic about is, this is a decision support tool. It's not a tool that's designed to replace human intelligence. And the tack we've taken a lot is it integrates in so many ways within our existing curriculum. When we talk about project management or product management or information security or, those business analyst roles or really any of the classes we have, there's a generative AI component to it. It doesn't necessarily need to be spun up as this whole brand new class. It's already integrating in a part of what we're already doing. And so we're taking a twofold approach where we say, okay, there's room for new curricular exercises in this space and room to develop new different kinds of electives for this. But it's also responsible to build this into what our already existing curriculums are. So, for example, one of my big heavy areas is information security, cybersecurity. it's the area I have a lot of experience with. My former role as a chief information security officer. So one of the things we look at is some of the ethical implications surrounding data privacy, different ways that this technology is being weaponized by bad actors, and so that's just an example of how that it fits into an already existing class. So we're kind of taking that two-pronged approach there, and really we began that in earnest. We realized, look, we're already building this into our curriculums before the rage even set in. And it just was kind of an organic process for us as we work to keep all of our course offerings kind of contemporary and up to date.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think it's great that our faculty and updating the program is so important to our faculty director, Kevin. I think you do a fantastic job of staying up to date with what is going on in the industry, and each year our students are really have all the knowledge that they need to enter the job force with all the up-to-date skills and information and topics. So I think that's fantastic as well. Okay, the next question we have are, what are some past or current topics students are researching, and what are some examples of projects that students have engaged on?
Yeah, so one of the things, and kind of to your last comment, something I kind of want to make a point about is, it's really important for a program like this, call it an MIS program, an ITM program, whatever. It's a technology innovation and a technology enablement type program. I think one of the really important things is that we are keeping in touch with what industry demands are. And so we can't rest on our laurels very long, and we can't be like what some of the other types of programs or master's degrees are, where the content doesn't change from year to year. From one year to the next, our elective list could look quite different. Our topics could look quite different because it takes a lot of work to really kind of keep abreast with what's going on in the industry. I think part of what's telling with our program is we do make a pretty good mixed use of research faculty, of clinical faculty, and of adjuncts. And the way we kind of use adjuncts, and adjuncts is a fancy way of saying, hey, this is somebody who is an industry pro in the real world, and they're coming back and they're teaching a class for us because they have this super, super relevant industry experience. And so it's important for us that as we seek to keep a program that is very aligned with what industry demands are, that we're implementing our classes in that way. But so another big piece to that is our classes aren't just classroom instruction where somebody's watching a faculty member walk in, they're throwing a bunch of horribly made and written PowerPoint slides on a projector, and they're calling it a class. What we're doing with our program, there is a lecture component to a lot of what we do, but there's a lot of activity components to what we do. And there's a very strong experiential component to what we do. So students are doing at the same time that they're learning. That looks way better on a resume when you're trying to sell your experience and tell future employers what you've done in a program, rather than I took a class in this, I took a class in that. We can start saying, well, I did this and I did that. And so one of the ways we do that is through this experientialness and through different relevant real world projects. And so I have a lot of projects that tend to be right now in the InfoSec space, more accurately how we're kind of coalescing with the intersection of InfoSec and AI, generative AI, and things like that. We have experiential or case study based instruction that's woven into pretty much all of our classes. When we look, so we have a class that is specific, we call it experiential IT, very popular among students. And really what that is it's a class of mini projects, we're not supposed to call it internships, but mini internships, mini projects that our instructors will kind of curate and do the de-risk and do the project management for. And what they do is they collaborate, they work with partners throughout the Western New York area and really throughout the world. It's become a bit of an international affair in terms of actually, kind of crafting and sculpting these mini projects so that they can be accomplished by a group of students within the semester time frame that we have, which can be a bit of a challenge. But if we look at what some of those projects are like, we have projects that are, kind of providing some form of consulting or counseling to underserved communities. We have projects that have to do with analytics and analysis in the real estate markets. A lot of AI-enabled projects, both in the tech space and the language translational space. Projects that have to do with food as medicine or Salesforce type projects that are focusing on employee relations. projects that are focusing on clean water and clean water delivery, artificial intelligence, again, maybe in the law space or the paralegal space. We're looking at different, projects that have to do, again, this is all technology enablement, technology-based innovation in these different areas. Health and wellness projects, gamification projects in a variety of different areas, different kinds of educational and test prep projects using new technology platforms. How we can deliver different kinds of NFC or other types of kind of hardware-based projects into the community. And so these are some of the things that we have, even just in our experiential IT class, let alone for some of the other classes we have too, where we're doing these different consultancies within these organizations or following a case-based approach.
Awesome. Yeah. I really do think that the experiential elements of our program really show when we look at the placement rates of our students and the job titles that our students are getting. Absolutely fantastic placement rates. And I think that definitely goes to show that an experiential element that we put into our curriculum, it definitely makes a difference when our graduates are entering the job market as well. So that's fantastic. And the final question that we have today, Kevin, is MSMIS offers career journeys, which I know we spoke a little bit about earlier, but can you advise how that prepares applicants for careers post-graduation?
Sure. Yeah, this term career journey that we kind of came up with is it's not something that's set in stone. It's not something that, and really what it is, it's a way to articulate the different collections or the different families of classes. If a student says, look, I want to go into the analyst role, or I want to go into the consulting role, or I want to go into the project management role, or enterprise architecture, or information security, cybersecurity, and that's just to name a few, right? These are different kind of career pathways that then will activate or turn on or just indicate that, look, a certain set or grouping of classes might make sense for you. We don't go so far as to make it an actual curricular requirement, and we stick with this term journey because everybody's journey is different. Everybody's journey is going to change along the way. And I've had some students where they say, well, I'm really interested in information security, but I also want to take this product management class, or I'm interested in the intersection between product development and cybersecurity, or I'm interested in, look, I want to be into the product management space, but I also want to know, well, how do I implement that in the cloud? So, depending on what a student's individual needs are, it doesn't, this term journey doesn't mean that you're corralled on one path. That's why we say it's unique. As you're kind of navigating that roadmap, so to speak, the turn-by-turn GPS direction, so to speak, is going to be a little different for each person. But what it means is, of our entire variety of different electives that we have, of which there's a lot, and it can be quite intimidating for a student who's coming on board to then see between 10 and 15 different electives they have to choose from. The career journeys are just kind of a way that we kind of enumerate and group the classes together. So it gives students a sense of, okay, this is generally where I want to be focusing, but if I know I have these career interests, if I know I'm already coming in with a certain level of experience or baseline of experience, this helps me to kind of navigate my way through all the different potential stories that I can tell based on the different electives that I take. And by the way, I've had some students where, maybe they took because of just, a scheduling nuance or because a class filled up, they took a class that they hadn't originally anticipated, but they thought, okay, well, this fits into my schedule. And then it completely turns their world upside down because all of a sudden they realize, oh my God, I really like this enterprise architecture space, or I really like the analyst role or the product management or the InfoSec role. I didn't think I was gonna, but I took this class and it totally opened up my eyes. Usually when I'm advising students, what I say is, don't be afraid to put a class on your, in your schedule that maybe you're not 100% sure you're going to like or not, because it's just going to make you more well-rounded at the end of the day. And you might realize, okay, there's something here that I didn't necessarily realize beforehand. And I've had that happen with quite a few students at this point. Something I will repeat to students in orientation and in our group advising sessions is sometimes a bad thing isn't a bad thing. And it might take you a while to figure out it's not a bad thing, but sometimes these unexpected twists and turns in our journey actually are quite formative. And so that's another reason why we stuck with this term journey as well, because For this 1 year, it's going to be an aggressive year. There's going to be a lot thrown at you, and it is going to be a journey from start to finish. So that's kind of why we adopted that term. What I can say consistent throughout the program, regardless of the journey you choose, we do have a certain courses that we designate as prerequisites or core classes. That core classes is the better term. Core classes that we want everybody to that we think are important enough that everybody needs to experience or take. But also there's some core tenets as well, or some big cultural pillars of the program in terms of professionalism and personal integrity. I do a lot of work with local businesses, as we talk, especially from an international student perspective, how can we do more visa sponsorship, or how can we, establish partnerships or pipelines so that when a student graduates the program, an employer knows what to expect potentially from somebody with an MIS degree. And as I work more and more with these employers, I'm hearing the same stories again in terms of, look, technical proficiency is great. What we need is somebody that knows how to be on time to a meeting. What we need is somebody that has some level of skill and polish already when talking to customers. What we need is somebody that when I give them an abstract project or an abstract set of instructions, they can figure out their way through that. They don't need to be micromanaged through that. So there are these tenets of core professionalism that we expect, at least here in the United States, but these core professionalism tenets that employers are saying, look, it's great. The technical skills are great, but we need for students to have these as well. That's another big area that we are really impressing upon with students, as well as the personal accountability, the personal integrity, how you conduct yourselves. And so those to me are just as important structural elements of the program. And look, those are something that you can be hired based off of just as much as your technical proficiency in some of these areas. And something I really, really, really want to impress upon students is, look, these technical and managerial journeys and career paths that you're going to take are awesome. And we want to be a partner and help in guiding you through that. But these professional expectations and how you conduct yourself in the program is just as important. And that's equally something that we want to stress, because we want to have it where when an employer sees, oh, you graduated from the University of Buffalo with an MIS degree, that right there means something. Regardless of what else is on your resume, that right there tells the story. And the way we tell that story is based on how our graduates hit the ground running and the different personal and professional characteristics and strengths that our candidates bring to the table.
That's great advice, Kevin. And I'm sure it's really amazing to see the students grow professionally and technically from the time that they start the program in the summer to the point 11 months later when they graduate, and be able to have these type of skills on their resume and be confident when they go into interviews that they do have these skills, and it was because of the UB MS-MIS program. So Kevin, that is the last question that we have. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, I look forward to seeing everybody in person who's watching this webinar. I think it's an exciting time to be in the program, especially with a lot of the advancements we're seeing. Like I said, we work really hard to stay relevant and to stay in line with what the industry demands are. I think our alums are going to tell the same kind of strong story. And so I hope to see everybody soon.
Absolutely. This is a great program, and I think this webinar will be really helpful for students that are interested in learning more about the program, and also our newly admitted students as well. So thank you so much, Kevin, for your time and answering these questions, and look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thanks, Meg. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.